So for the sake of time, we're just going to jump right in and get started so that we can cover everything that we've got prepared for you all. But I wanted to just say thank you. Really excited to have you join us on this learning series topic of human trafficking. It's very evident to us looking at the registration numbers that the community cares about learning more about this just as much as we do. We're learning about this every day. And so gathered some information that we hope will be important and will be helpful to you all. And we do these learning series sessions a few times a year. And so if you have any topics that come to mind that you think will be helpful to you all, or just have some suggestions or recommendations, please share them with us in the future. I've got some team members here from Second Story that I'd like to introduce to you all. We've got Genevieve Dunn, who is our Compliance and Risk Management Officer, who will start this presentation by doing just talking a little bit about the bigger issue at hand. And then we will bring in Kathy Ben, who is the VP of Residential Services. And we've got Soraya Borja, who's the VP of our Community-Based Services. We've got Alex, who will then talk a little bit about how to stay engaged with us or to reach out to us if you have additional questions after this session. Because it's a short session, it's only 30 minutes long, we won't have dedicated time set aside for Q&A. But that doesn't mean that we won't have the opportunity to connect afterwards. So please be on the lookout for that email with an email address that you could always use to ask any questions that come up over the course of this presentation. But again, welcome, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Genevieve so she can start the presentation for us.
Thank you, Jade. Give me one moment to set up my screen.
If we could just ask you all to mute so that you can hear us better, that would be appreciated as well.
I'd like to start today by reviewing some important statistics, the first of which is this number, $99 billion. This accounts for the worth of the global sex trafficking industry. The US is accountable for almost 10 billion of that. 11 to 14, this is the age of entry, the average age of entry into the sex trafficking industry. When we look at the data from across the lifespan, we see the highest rate of industry activity between 9 to 25%, the estimated percentage of sex trafficking victims who are male. 22%, the increase in online recruitment of sex trafficking victims. The internet, especially social media sites such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat, are now the top recruitment locations for all forms of trafficking, including labor trafficking. Number 1, Fairfax County's position in the nation for gang-related sex trafficking prosecution. And finally, 0.5%, the amount of victims who self-report. For example, about a decade ago, members of a Fairfax-based street gang called the Underground Gangster Crips attempted to recruit over 800 girls via Facebook Messenger into a sex trafficking ring. The number of girls who reported this was 0. What is human trafficking? The most commonly used definition involves the compulsion of somebody into commercial sex or labor through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. However, as you can see here, there is an important exception to this definition for minors. Because they lack the legal capacity to consent, force, fraud, and coercion need not be present for a youth to be considered a trafficking victim. What that means is that any form of commercial sex provided by a youth is considered sex trafficking, regardless of whether or not they believe they're doing it consensually. Now, globally, labor trafficking is estimated to be more common, but in developed nations such as the United States, sex trafficking is reported at higher rates up to a factor of 8, which is why I'm focusing primarily on that today. But surely you might ask yourself, this kind of thing doesn't happen in places like Fairfax County. Well, we generally think of trafficking as a kind of seedy, dirty thing. This area is not generally considered to be a seedy, dirty place. But it's important to know that high-income areas are actually ripe with sex trafficking because people have the disposable income around here to spend on it. What are some common ways victims get recruited into sex trafficking? I'd like to tell you a few stories of youth in general who've become involved with this industry, as well as some stories we've specifically helped within Second Story's programs. Like I said, online trawling is increasingly common in today's increasingly digital society. Consider a lonely, insecure teen who's struggling with depression and anxiety. She often posts pictures of herself on Instagram. She doesn't have very many friends, and she feels very left out when it comes to her peers. She's messaged by an older man who calls her beautiful and precious, and he wants to be her friend. Over time, she grows to trust him. They start an online relationship. He says he believes she could be a model, and he invites her over to take headshots. Afterwards, he tells her she needs to pay him for her portfolio and suggests she has sex with him in lieu of money. Maybe he lets her go home. Maybe he kidnaps her. This arrangement continues as long as he acts as her modeling agent. Sometimes he forces her to have sex with him, as well as other photographers too. We've also seen experiences of what's called survival sex, or sex for services while on the run, such as shelter or food. Take the situation in which a gay teen comes out to his parents who are unsupportive and kick him out of the house, as happens with many LGBTQ youth. He camps out at a bus station and meets other runaways who tell him about someone who might give him a room. When the youth shows up, the person who owns the house says the teen can stay there as long as he provides sexual favors. The teen doesn't have any other housing options, so he agrees. Finally, we see a strong connection between sex trafficking and gangs. Here at Second Story, we deal with a lot of gang-involved youth or youth from areas where gang activity is prevalent. Let's say a young teen grows up in a neighborhood with a lot of gang activity. She gets involved with the gang for protection and to find a sense of community because her parents are always working. The gang says she needs to engage in prostitution to help them pay a drug debt they owe to a rival gang. If she refuses, she's told her family will be targeted for violence. She feels she has no choice but to comply to protect them because her family is undocumented, and she worries that if she gets law enforcement involved, they may be deported. Like LGBTQ youth, undocumented immigrants are disproportionately victimized for both sex and labor trafficking. Regardless of how it happens, recruitment into sex trafficking often occurs in 3 identifiable phases, and knowing these phases can be crucial to identifying and thus preventing the sex trafficking recruitment process. The first phase is called scouting, and this is how traffickers identify potential victims. Anyone can be trafficked, but some people are more vulnerable than others because they have greater needs. When we look at the data, we find that these are the top 5 risk factors: substance abuse, runaway homeless youth, unstable housing, mental health concerns, and recent migration or relocation. Additionally, something to consider is that youth in suburbs, even when they come from wealthy, stable backgrounds, have something to prove, one might say. Fairfax County is close to a big city, Washington, D.C., and there's quite a bit of income disparity here. Some kids are very sheltered, while some are more exposed to things like gangs and drugs and violence. When we put those 2 groups together, you get some youth wanting to prove that they're cool and they're fun and they can be reckless and dangerous just like the other kids. And so they become more likely to take risks and engage in risky behaviors that could lead to trafficking thanks to this peer pressure. This is a fact traffickers know and understand, and so they deliberately target suburban kids sometimes for that reason. As part of the scouting process, scouts will frequently buy gifts for potential victims to make them feel special, especially things that enhance secret communication, such as cell phones. So watch out for youth who suddenly have lots of money, jewelry, makeup, technology, because that can be a sign that they're being scouted. And again, increasingly scouting is occurring via social media. Scouts will look for victims who post about breakups, mental health issues, family problems, and so on, because these vulnerabilities can be exploited. They may be authentic in their presentation of themselves online, or they may catfish, meaning they'll use a fake profile. They may also use current victims as scouts because being recruited by a same-age peer can be less suspicious and less threatening than being recruited by an older person. We need to teach youth to be mindful of what they're posting on social media and who they allow access to their profiles. Remind them to be cautious of strangers trying to build relationships with them, and remind them that not everyone on the internet is who they seem to be. The second phase is manipulation, or how traffickers develop their relationship with victims. They prey on what youth desire most in this world: love, hope, and a sense of belonging. The easiest way to do this is to fake a romantic relationship, making the victim believe that they're dating or even engaged. However, their love will always be conditional. For example, I'll love you as long as you do what I ask for. Often they'll identify and exploit the victim's perceived flaws to make them feel dependent on the trafficker. If the youth is insecure about their body, for instance, the trafficker may communicate concepts such as, I'm the only one who will ever be attracted to you. And if the victim starts to become suspicious or to withdraw from the relationship for whatever reason, traffickers will do something called love bombing to win them back. This consists of over-the-top displays of affection, like flattery or gifts, intended to overwhelm and manipulate the victim. The relationship is still relatively delicate at this stage, so traffickers will not openly force the victim to have sex yet, but they will use sexual fraud or coercion instead to achieve the same goal. Maybe, for example, the trafficker takes the victim to a party and they smoke marijuana with the trafficker's friends. The trafficker explains they need to pay for the drugs before they leave, but neither the trafficker nor the victim have any cash. The trafficker suggests the victim trade sexual favors as compensation and will guilt them into it by being extremely apologetic, reassuring them it's a one-time solution, promising to make it up to them somehow, saying the victim would do this if they really loved them. And so the dynamic becomes normalized over time. The third phase is trapping, meaning how traffickers get their victims to stay. If the manipulation phase was successful enough, victims may not actually want to leave. They may have formed such a strong emotional and psychological bond. For example, the trafficker may have convinced the victim that no one else can love them like they can, or they're not worthy enough to be loved by anyone else. This idea that they're genuinely in love means they may not even identify themselves as victims who are being trafficked, and thus identify themselves as someone who needs to escape their current situation. If the victim does want to leave, the trafficker may stop them with force now or with threats of physical force. This violence can be aimed at the victim themselves or at other targets, such as the victim's family, friends, even pets. The trafficker may provide the victim with drugs to make them more compliant and or create addiction, which will further enhance the victim's dependence on the trafficker. Finally, they may use tactics such as blackmail. A common tactic is taping the victim during sex and then threatening to publish the video if the victim tells. Legal threats are also very common, such as in convincing the victim that they might be arrested for something like prostitution if they go to the police. Unfortunately, this sometimes happens, so it's an effective threat. Only some states in the United States have laws protecting youth for being prosecuted from things such as juvenile prostitution. For example, actually early this year in February 2022, Virginia passed on a bill called the Safe Harbor Bill, which would have directed sex trafficked youth to specialized services instead of criminalizing them. Understanding the three-step process is crucial to identifying potential recruitment into sex trafficking. But of course, we may not always be privy to the details of a youth romantic relationship. So here are some other signs that someone has become involved in sex trafficking. School problems, such as poor grades and poor attendance, a loss of interest in age-appropriate activities, a drop in self-esteem, a change in social group, having more than one cell phone, because as I mentioned earlier, traffickers may purchase new phones for victims to make secret communication easier, becoming secretive about their social media, becoming gang involved or involved with others who are gang involved, increased substance use and partying, sneaking out of the home or running away from home, and having an older romantic partner, especially one who seems very controlling of behavior or even appearance. Now, once you've identified someone who you are concerned may be a victim, especially if they're youth, how do you help them? Obviously, education is number one, and that's what we're here for today, knowing the signs of something possibly being wrong so you know to ask questions. When asking questions, don't judge or threaten punishment. You need to create a space that is safe and compassionate. Remember always that victims may have participated in activities they're ashamed of or that are illegal, so they may not be forthcoming with information right away. As adults, it can be helpful to lean on other youth for information as well, such as siblings or classmates. If the other youth are hesitant to expose their peer, We want to teach them the lesson that the victim's health is the most important thing. Even if the victim is mad at them today, one day they will be grateful they got help for them. And knowing what help is available is important too. Here's another statistic, a more hopeful one, like the ones that we discussed earlier, 40%. Friends and family were the access point for help for 40% of identified victims. This is the top reported access point in the study and suggests the importance of people with proximity to victims in identifying and supporting survivors, either directly or indirectly, such as by supporting programs like Second Story. The number one resource is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. They operate 24/7 via phone, online chat, and text in over 200 languages. Fairfax County also has its own hotline operated by the Department of Family Services, which is also 24/7 and available in many languages. Finally, the DMV area has dozens of local organizations specifically aimed at supporting victims of labor and sex trafficking. Importantly, many of these services will assist undocumented immigrants, as that can be a major barrier in accessing services. And this presentation, by the way, will be sent to you guys, so you don't have to memorize the list right now. I'd like to leave you with this quote: "No one can do everything, but everyone can do something." Hopefully, with the information provided today by myself and now by Kathy and Soraya, you will each walk away with a deeper understanding of the trafficking industry and how to prevent and assist victims. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Jade now.
Genevieve, thank you. That was really, really insightful. And just even I got a lot from what you covered there in 15 minutes. And Kathy and Soraya, if you don't mind just raising your hand so people know who you are. Just kind of wave at us. Okay, so we've got Kathy Ben, as I mentioned, from RVP. She's our VP of Residential Services, and we've got Soraya Borja, who is the VP of our Community-Based Services. And I have a few questions that I will ask, and they can shed some more insight on how all of this is relevant to the programs that we have here at Second Story. What are some trafficking trends and patterns that we've noticed in our community, past and present?
I can start us off. Thanks, Jade, and thanks again, Genevieve. That was great. So what we've been seeing really is a trend of all of the types of risk factors that Genevieve mentioned. We get a lot of young people that have been running away for long periods of time, who are skipping school, not communicating with anyone. We look for red flags. We ask questions about, how old is your boyfriend, girlfriend? We see a lot of teenagers with adults partners, which is a big risk factor. Substance abuse that's more than just experimental, which we would expect with teenagers, but not heavy drug use. We do see more of that. We also see tattoos in strange places, hips and lower back, not that we're seeing them, but that they're telling us about them. But things like princess and or daddy are not normal teenage tattoos. Not that any teenage tattoo is normal, but over-sexualized behavior is also a red flag for us. Indications from trauma, disconnection from family support, lots of families with, different extended families that kids go to, or multiple kids, and so their attention is taken away. No one thing is an automatic, but a pattern of different, a collection of all these things that we see. We also see, recruitment by other girls to get young teens involved. They'll go to a party and they'll say, bring a friend, and they'll end up in a hotel room with older men that parents are not aware of, or they lie about their age to get in. We all know that teenagers are wired for risky behavior and adrenaline, and they're looking for excitement. And sometimes they get themselves into situations that they can't control. So I'll stop there and let Soraya continue.
Yes, and good morning all, and thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for being here as well to hear what is the situation in our programs. I work at the community-based services over here. We have the after-school programs, but also we have the resource centers, and we support the families, usually new immigrant families that they come to this country because they want to have a better life. They are escaping so many things like natural problems. I mean, I'm sorry. They have escaping like problems with gangs, also poverty, extremely poverty. The parents usually they come first, and they pay the traffickers for them to bring them to this country because there is no other way that they will be able to come. And the reason that they come is because they live in extremely poverty. They don't have other options. If they have a business, gang members, they will come, and they were asking for money just to have to protect them from the gang members. So there is no really options for this family. They live on fear, and not only that, but they're fear that one day they will take their kids and they will invite them to join to the gangs. And some of our kids, they have said that they have seen their families killing in front of them in their countries. So that is the reason that more of the families that we work with, they just escape in their countries. The other thing is that I can say that the way that we support our families here at the Kulma Resource Center and in our after-school programs, I will say they are new in the country. They don't know any resources. So we are trying to look for a health insurance for them to start having that so they can access to mental health services that will support them with their trauma. Also, the after-school programs help a lot to these families and their children because they will have access for homework help as well as recreational activities. Also, if they need any other support, like looking for a housing, or if they need any support with lawyers, any services with immigration, you know, in our resource centers, we will be able to support with that, even with food donations that we do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So those are the ways that we support our families out well, and we can see the needs and the reasons that, you know, they just come to this country because in fact, you know, they are suffering a lot.
Thank you, Soraya. Thank you, Soraya. And she shared some examples of how we work with victims of human trafficking when they show up in our programs. Kathy, do you have any specific examples of how we may work through some of those challenges with our youth who are coming in with this issue?
Sure. I think we have to remember that young people in this situation are afraid and they don't trust adults. Most of the teens that we see are not even aware they're being trafficked. They don't see it that way. They have a boyfriend that loves them, or they are, you know, being showered with gifts, and they think that's normal. So we, even in our young adult programs, we ask questions and they say no to everything. They are not giving away, you know, they're not having to trade things for sex. Like, they don't recognize that they're being trafficked, which is why we have to develop rapport. We are very sensitive to giving options and choice and empowering young people to help themselves. We we support non-judgmentally. We offer safe spaces where they can feel comfortable and feel cared about. And we're trying to establish that relationship so that they will tell us things. At our Teens in Crisis program, it's only a 21-day program, so it takes some time to develop rapport with families as well. And we try and work with the families to recognize red flags and things that make their children more at risk. We do work with county resources, and with families' permission, we can refer them to trafficking organizations. We work with the gang prevention task force as well. So, it's more of a looking for red flags and raising awareness of where this risky behavior could lead. And our young adult programs are longer term, so we have more time to work with them and to build trust and to help them get the resources they need. But awareness and empowering young people is the big step.
Yeah, and establishing trust to get any teenager to share information or any troubles or issues that they're experiencing in their life with adults is always going to be a problem. Are there other challenges that you see in your programs as you strive to support these young victims, in addition to what you've already shared? Soraya, if you don't mind, I'll start with you.
Yeah, of course. I will say that a lot of our community members and also of our clients in the after school programs, they are afraid to talk about these issues because the parents, some of the parents, they don't have documents and they are afraid that, they are going to be deported and they will be separated from their kids. Some of the kids, they are afraid also because the parents, they don't have documents. And also they still have to send money for their families and they still have to pay the traffickers because the amount of money that they're asking to their clients to come to this country is just a big amount of money, and they have that debt in their country, so they don't want to talk sometimes about that because they are just afraid, and they are paying low wages with no benefits. Sometimes I notice over here when they come to the Culmo Resort Center, for instance, here in Falls Church, I have seen people that they bring, it's just an example, a check saying like $100, but it's not really $100. They just put $1, .00, and they pay them only $1, but people, they don't know how to write, how to read in English and also in Spanish, some of them. So they think that's $100, but in reality, they pay them only $1 in the check. So we can see those kinds of, that people trafficking on that way because they are not paying what is the right amount. So they get scanned. Some of them, they are people, they are working for long hours, and if they don't do that, they just tell them that they will contact immigration on these people. So they are afraid. They think that they don't have rights, even though they do have it in this country, but they don't know. They don't know so many things. So that is when we do our community conversations in our community resources, community resources for them to have the information. And we invite people from the county, we invite the police in our programs to let them know, that they can't let the authority know about what is happening so they can have support.
Soraya, just to bring it back, just because we're almost out of time, trafficking prevention programs. I mean, you've already covered a little bit about how we're working with partners in the community to address some of these bigger issues. What are some trafficking prevention strategies that we have in place, Kathy and Soraya, just very briefly?
We are working hard to connect young people with healthy role models and mentors so that they can establish healthy permanent connections. That's a really important goal for all of our programs. Education is huge. We try and connect them to services, to healthy adults, to teach them about healthy relationships and violence prevention programs. We do a lot of that in all of our programs.
And Soraya, in addition to all of the different ways you're working with our partners, do you just have maybe like in a sentence or two, let us know if there are other prevention initiatives that we are putting into place to prevent trafficking?
Yeah, well, also we do the partners and prevention curriculums with our students. For instance, we have the safety relationships. Also, we have Family Reunited to help the families to reunificate with their children that they were back in their countries when they come over here, so they can have good relationships. I think that helps a lot because they have been, the parents and their children, they have experienced the trafficking, so that support the family to be reunited and to have access to mental health issues, mental health services to support their issues.
Thank you. We have so much more that we'd love to share with you all, but we want to respect your time. And as I mentioned, we will send out a follow-up email to everyone who's registered. Alex, do you want to quickly cover what will be in that email so people know how to stay engaged with us?
Definitely. So I would love to invite you all to one of our open door informational sessions. They run about 45 minutes, are very casual, very similar to this learning series today. And it's just, again, an introduction or summary of Second Story, and just we go a little bit more in depth into our programs and just, again, ways to get involved. And we also have a very interesting and informative blog post that was put together by some of our staff and an intern that you all can take a look at and read more about this topic specifically. And again, as Jade mentioned, I'm going to send you a link to the registration for the open door and the blog post and just some other ways to get involved via an email. So just be on the lookout from that. But thank you.
And continue to please share with us some ideas on topics that we could cover as an organization. It's really important to us that as we do the work we do, we continue to keep our community engaged so that we all can become more educated and know how to protect the young people in our community. So I just want to say thank you again for spending this half hour with us, and please be on the lookout on our newsletter. We will be announcing future events and topics that that we plan to host. So if you haven't already, please sign up to get more information from our end. Thank you so much. Have a great day.